Not long ago, I had a quiet life, but my life changed forever when King David saw me naked from his palace while I was bathing. Hello, my name is Bathsheba, and this is my surprising story. I was the wife of Uriah, a loyal man and a brave warrior, but the king's lust brought great tragedies to my life. David and I committed adultery, and when I became pregnant, the king tried to hide our sin by sending my husband to die on the battlefield. After his death, I became King David's wife, and our son was born, but he died shortly after as a punishment from God. That is a pain I still carry in my heart every day of my life. However, in his great mercy, God gave us another chance, and from our marriage, Solomon was born, who would become one of the wisest and most important kings in the history of Israel. My story is a mixture of sin, pain, repentance, and redemption. I invite you to stay until the end to hear the full story of my life and learn valuable lessons for your spiritual growth. My life became complicated on a day that seemed like any other in Jerusalem. I was on the rooftop of my house performing my purification ritual. We were living in difficult times, always under the threat of wars and conflicts. My husband Uriah, a brave Hittite soldier, was on the battlefield fighting for Israel. I never imagined that that day would change my life forever. From the top of his palace, King David saw me. He was the king, the anointed one of God, and in those days, his word was law. Soon after, I received a message informing me that the king was summoning me. With my heart racing, I went to his palace, unaware of the consequences that this meeting would bring. David welcomed me with a lustful gaze. We spoke briefly, and before I knew it, I found myself trapped in a relationship I did not want, but from which I could not escape. At that time, the king's power was absolute, and although my loyalty was with Uriah, I could not avoid what happened, and we ended up in his bed in a forbidden relationship. A few weeks passed, and I discovered I was pregnant. Fear and confusion overwhelmed me. What was I going to do? I knew I couldn't keep it a secret for long. I informed David, hoping for his reaction. He, seeking a solution, summoned Uriah from the battlefield. His plan was simple: if Uriah spent one night with me, no one would suspect the true sinful origin of my pregnancy. But Uriah, faithful and loyal to his fellow soldiers, refused to enjoy the comforts of home while the others suffered on the battlefield. He slept outside, demonstrating an integrity that only deepened my guilt and despair. Seeing that his plan had failed, David made an even more desperate decision. He sent Uriah back to war, carrying a letter with his own death sentence, an order to place him in the most dangerous part of the battle, where he would surely die. And so it was. Uriah died in combat, and my heart filled with a mixture of pain, guilt, and confusion. After his death, David took me as his wife, and although my position changed, my spirit remained deeply wounded. Reflecting on these events, I want to share a lesson with you. The decisions we make, especially when we are under pressure or power, can have profound and lasting consequences. It's crucial to consider not only the visible actions, but also the intentions and hearts behind them. In the midst of confusion and pain, we must always seek integrity and truth, remembering that our actions impact others and ourselves. Through my story, I hope that together we can find lessons of humility, repentance, and the constant pursuit of doing what is right, even when it's difficult. After Uriah left for the battlefield, carrying with him his own death sentence written by King David, I was left alone, facing an uncertain future. It wasn't long before the news of his death arrived. The messenger informed me that he had fallen bravely in combat, right in the most dangerous line, just as David had ordered. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces, not only for the loss of my beloved husband, but also for the role that David and in some way, I had played in his fatal destiny. The following days I spent immersed in deep mourning, dressed in grief and surrounded by a silence that resonated with my own remorse. When David heard of Uriah's death, he brought me to his palace and made me his wife. This act, intended to legitimize our relationship and the child we were expecting, only deepened my sense of emptiness. The speed at which events unfolded seemed unreal, and every step I took in the palace reminded me of the price we had paid for my new position. But our ordeal did not end there. Soon after, the prophet of God, named Nathan, arrived at the palace with a direct message from the Creator. He told David a parable about a rich man who, having many sheep, took the only sheep of a poor man to offer to a traveler. David, full of indignation, declared that such a man deserved to die. It was then that Nathan revealed that David was that man, who had taken what did not belong to him and had Uriah killed to cover his sin. Nathan's condemnation was clear and severe. Therefore, the sword will never depart from your house, because you have despised me and taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. 2 Samuel 12 verse 10. The gravity of our actions was exposed, and the guilt settled even deeper in my soul. Soon after, our child became seriously ill. Despite David's fasting and fervent prayers, the child ultimately died. This blow was devastating. Not only had I lost my husband, but also my child. The sorrow was unbearable, and in those moments of darkness, the lessons of humility and vulnerability became painfully clear. I want to invite you to reflect on the importance of the decisions we make and how they can affect not only our lives but also those of others. My story shows how actions driven by desire and power can lead to disastrous consequences. How then can we find the guidance and strength to act with integrity and justice, especially when facing difficult decisions? Let us learn to always seek truth and righteousness, remembering that our actions have an echo that resonates far beyond the moment in which they are taken. After the tragic events that marked the loss of my husband and my child, life in the palace became a constant reminder of our actions and their consequences. When the prophet Nathan confronted David with the parable that revealed our guilt, he also announced a divine punishment that would change our future forever. The pain of losing our child left a deep wound in our souls, a mark that would always accompany us. David, desperate and repentant, prostrated himself before God, fasting and praying fervently for the child's life. But despite his penitence, the child died. I watched in silence as the man who had been invincible before his enemies crumbled, powerless before the divine decree. This moment was crucial, not only for David and me, but for all of Israel. The fall of such a powerful king showed that no one is above divine justice, that our actions have consequences, and that even kings must bow before truth and righteousness. In the midst of our grief, David and I drew closer once more, finding comfort in each other, sharing our guilt and our sorrow. Through this suffering, we began a process of purification and healing. Shortly afterward, I was blessed with another pregnancy. Our son, whom we named Solomon, became a symbol of redemption and hope, a promise from God that even in the midst of adversity, His grace could restore us. Solomon's arrival brought a significant change in our lives. Nathan prophesied that Solomon would be loved by God and that his reign would be one of peace and wisdom. With each day that he grew, we saw in him the promise of a new beginning, not only for our family but for all of Israel. This period of my life taught me about the depth of forgiveness and the resilience of the human spirit. I learned that genuine repentance and humility before God can open paths of restoration and peace, even when they seem impossible. I invite you to reflect on your own life. How do you face your mistakes and seek redemption? The story shows us that grace is within reach for everyone and that it is never too late to change the course of our story. Just as David and I found a path to healing, you too can seek reconciliation and peace through sincere repentance and faith in God's mercy. The birth of my son Solomon marked a new chapter in my life and in the history of Israel. Amidst the remorse and healing from past tragedies, his arrival was like a ray of light, a divine gift that brought new hope to all of us. When Solomon was born, the prophet Nathan gave him the name Jedediah, which means beloved by the Lord. This name was a sign of God's favor and mercy toward our family, despite the mistakes that David and I had made. Solomon grew up under God's watchful eye and the loving care of his family. From a young age, he showed an unusual inclination toward wisdom and knowledge, which suggested that his future as Israel's leader would be remarkable. During Solomon's early years, David and I worked hard to guide him, not only in matters of the kingdom but also in the fear and knowledge of God. For us, it was crucial that he understood the importance of justice, mercy, and faith, values that we hoped would define his reign. The court was filled with intrigue and political challenges, but our main focus remained on ensuring that Solomon was prepared for the many challenges he would face as king. The political situation at that time was complicated. Israel had expanded considerably under David's rule, but internal tensions and external threats remained constant. It was a time of consolidating power and forming strategic alliances, both within the kingdom and with neighboring nations. David, aware that his time as king was coming to an end, began preparing the way for Solomon to succeed him, ensuring that the transition of power would be as smooth as possible. These experiences left a deep mark on my life. I learned about resilience, redemption, and the transformative power of love and faith. I saw how God's grace could manifest not only in our victories, but also in our weaknesses and most difficult moments. I invite you to reflect on how the arrival of a new life can mark a new beginning for each of us. How, like Solomon, can we use our gifts and opportunities to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God? As I approach the end of my life, I reflect on my role as the mother of King Solomon and the final years of my husband David. During this time, my position in the court changed significantly. I went from being a tragic and controversial figure to becoming a stabilizing and strategic influence in the kingdom. The end of David's reign was marked by uncertainty over who would succeed him. Although David had promised that Solomon would be his heir, tensions between my sons and their half-brothers threatened to divide the kingdom. Adonijah, one of David's older sons, driven by ambition and supported by some of David's senior advisors, proclaimed himself king without his father's consent. Aware of the delicate balance of power and the promise that David had made regarding Solomon, I knew I had to act. I approached David, who was already bedridden due to his advanced age and declining health. I reminded David of his promise and the need to act quickly to ensure a peaceful transition of power. "My lord, do not let your servant and your son Solomon be judged guilty after the king rests with his ancestors," I said to him. David, recognizing the urgency of the situation, immediately ordered Nathan the prophet and Zadok the priest to anoint Solomon as king of Israel. This quick and decisive action stifled Adonijah's rebellion and solidified Solomon's position as the rightful heir to the throne. As queen mother, my role expanded significantly under Solomon's reign. I was not only his advisor but also a maternal figure for an expanding kingdom. I worked to promote justice and mercy, supporting Solomon in his efforts to rule with wisdom and discernment. My influence extended beyond the palace walls, as I became involved in various initiatives to improve the lives of women in our kingdom, ensuring that their voices were heard in the court. This focus on social justice was something I hoped to leave as a lasting legacy, not only from my reign but also from Solomon's. How can we, when faced with challenges and transitions, make decisions that promote peace and stability? My story is a testament that even in times of great uncertainty, strength and clarity of purpose can guide nations and families toward a promising future. Through wisdom and righteousness, each of us can leave a lasting impact on the world around us. My name is Bathsheba, and this was my surprising story. As I look back from days filled with challenges to moments of deep reflection, I have learned vital lessons that I want to share with you, hoping they will illuminate and guide your spiritual path. First, I learned about redemption. My life began normally, but it took an unexpected turn that led me to face challenges and tragedies I never imagined. Through these moments, including my relationship with David and the loss of our first child, I understood that even in the midst of guilt and pain, redemption is possible. God offers second chances, and His grace is sufficient to renew and restore us. This truth is at the heart of every biblical story, including mine, which you can explore in the second book of Samuel. Second, I learned the importance of wisdom and counsel. As Queen Mother, my influence over Solomon was key to his development as a wise and just king. I discovered that sharing our wisdom and guiding others with love and truth has a lasting impact. Wisdom is a divine gift, and actively seeking it, as Solomon did, is essential for anyone who aspires to live a life of meaning and purpose. Third, I understood the power of prayer and divine intervention. In the darkest moments, when everything seemed lost, it was God's intervention through the prophet Nathan and David's prayer that brought light to our situation. This taught me that no matter how desperate our circumstances may seem, we should never underestimate the power of turning to God in prayer. He listens and often acts in ways we cannot anticipate. My life was anything but easy. I went from being a soldier's wife to becoming part of a story of love and loss that affected the fate of a kingdom. But every step along the way was part of a larger plan, woven by the hand of God. In your own days, when you face difficult decisions or moments of uncertainty, remember my story. You are not alone in your struggles. Seek wisdom, embrace redemption, and never stop speaking with the Creator. These practices will guide and sustain you on a path of spiritual growth and depth. At the end of my life, I see every event, every challenge, and every blessing as part of a greater design, a tapestry of grace and divine purpose. I hope that by sharing my story, you will find inspiration to continue seeking and serving God in all aspects of your life. Now, I invite you to click on the recommended video to discover the incredible story of Gideon, an unexpected hero who, with faith, freed his people. Dive into a narrative of courage and miracles, where 300 brave men challenge a massive army with only trumpets and torches. This story not only showcases epic battles but also deep lessons about trust and leadership under divine guidance. Don't miss this exciting biblical adventure that will change your perception of strength and power.